are good memories associated with it. Like, I can still in my brain see an entire locker room full of guys. Like, our locker room was basically three like long hallways with one path down the middle, and there were TVs all over the place. And I have a vivid memory of a bunch of guys laid out in the middle between two-a-days, feet up on their chairs, towel pillows behind their heads, all watching the same episodes of Maury Povich on TV and reacting in real time to these paternity tests, losing our mind trying to be anywhere but where we were. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Echoes, a Notre Dame podcast. I'm Mike Golic Jr. alongside Jessica Smetana, back for episode number 2. Thank you to everybody that checked out our first episode, that downloaded, subscribed, rated, and reviewed wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and watched us there. Left a review. Shout out to Z Holter. Yes, we read reviews and we'll read them on air. We are shameless and not above that. But yeah, thank you to everyone for checking that out. Continue to follow us and check us out at the Echoes ND Pod on all social media. Felt like a good first week, Jess. It was fun to hear from a lot of people who seem to enjoy the podcast.
It was awesome, Mike. And one thing that my main takeaway was how many Notre Dame fans love to talk about games that they've been to at Notre Dame Stadium. I think we need to have a episode where we just remember some games down the road. The YouTube comments were full of my favorite game was this or that. And I think we could have a blast with that. But yeah, last week we were saying, it's July, bear with us. Not a lot going on. But this week, couldn't disagree with that more. It is camp week, Mike.
Oof.
The players are back on campus. They're going to play football this week. We have more recruiting news. We have some very spicy Big Ten Media Days quotes that we want to dissect and talk about from Lincoln Riley, from James Franklin and Kurt Signetti. A lot of the villains, if you're a Notre Dame fan in college football right now, had a lot to say about scheduling. But of course, we're going to mostly talk about the USC Notre Dame series and hopefully the continuation of it.
God willing.
God willing. Yeah, we'll get to that though. But yeah, we want to start with camp, Mike. You were a player at Notre Dame. You went back to camp every season. Were you dreading it? Were you excited for it? Was it something that you just wanted to get through? What were your feelings when camp started?
Utter dread. You're excited for the season, but camp is just such a mental grind as much as anything else. And there are good memories associated with it. Like, I can still in my brain see an entire locker room full of guys. Like, our locker room was basically three like long hallways with one path down the middle, and there were TVs all over the place. And I have a vivid memory of a bunch of guys laid out in the middle between two-a-days, feet up on their chairs, towel pillows behind their heads, all watching the same episodes of Maury Povich on TV and reacting in real time to these paternity tests, losing our mind trying to be anywhere but where we were. So there's like fun memories like that and the things you try to do to beat the heat, but mostly it's just dreading the back half of a two-a-day. Jess, there is no worse feeling on planet Earth than looking at and feeling your wet gear and knowing you have to put it back on. Wet shoulder pads and knee braces going into that second round. It wasn't even the practice. It was stretching. The dynamic warm-up before the second practice was the closest that I got to breaking down on any given day in camp. So no, I definitely don't miss any of that part of the football experience.
Okay, so you were obviously a player over two different coaching eras, the end of the Weis era and the beginning of the Kelly era. Was there any sort of difference going into camp with Coach Kelly than with Charlie Weis, or was it really just sort of hot, there's corn sweat, your pads are stinky? It just kind of was the same thing year in and year out.
Yeah, the practices were so different. Charlie came from the Patriots. Charlie came directly from the NFL. So a lot of what we did was structured that way versus when Brian first came in, we were going to be a tempo team. So our practices were all under 2 hours, moving really fast. The goal was to get us in great shape so we could run tempo and hit the ground running in the first week. So from that standpoint, it was very different. And I don't know, when you have a coaching change, everyone's kind of on notice and you're trying to make a really good first impression. And even as you got into subsequent training camps with that group, for me in the O-line, I had 4 O-line coaches in 5 years. So every camp was trying to get to know a different coach's technique, know what they wanted out of you so that you could try and get playing time on the field. So all of it keeps you on edge, but it really, you fall back onto the ultimate cliche. you can never worry about anything outside of your little field division. Like it's the next period, it's the next meeting. It's all that monotony there and just doing whatever it takes in the meantime. Like we were lucky though, like we were the era of training camp where we were starting, you couldn't do 2-a-days and back-to-back days. So you had to have an every other day kind of thing in there. The guys that were a couple classes before me used to have to go and do training camp out behind, I think it was like O'Neill Hall, back over towards the bookstore on that raggedy old field that's got a bunch of uneven grass. So we were at least doing it on all the grass fields out, outside in the practice field where the new indoor is now. So I'm sure camp is light years better and more efficient for these guys too, since we're past the era of the NCAA where they couldn't give you cream cheese with your bagels.
I was going to ask
these
you
guys
that.
Probably get whatever they want food wise.
So they
it's
have
awesome.
better food now, probably better recovery, and hopefully better facilities as a whole. You mentioned having multiple coaches throughout your tenure, multiple O-line coaches. So this year, Notre Dame has the same offensive coordinator coming back, a different defensive coordinator, but one that I think a lot of people expect to sort of just continue more of the same, because Marcus Freeman is obviously a former defensive coordinator, defensive head coach, who's going to, want a certain style, a certain standard. And so I don't expect that will change too much, but, continuity wise, I mean, we're going to talk about a couple breakout players that we're predicting, or I guess predicting maybe a little bit of both, in this upcoming season. But continuity wise, how important is it for offensive players coming back with the same offensive coordinator, to just be sort of up to speed on what they're going to be doing, what they're going to be asked to do in this offense this season?
Yeah, I think continuity is always super important, especially like when we had a new coach during the offseason, it was always kind of like this trial run until you get to game day. And that's why the spring game actually has some importance for those new coaches, because you learn what someone's game day love language is like. You learn how they're going to operate when things hit the fan, what they want to do in terms of the conversations on the sideline between series, how you problem solve together type things, in addition to the technique that they're coaching, how they, give that information to you in the meeting rooms. And so I think going into a season where for the lion's share of position groups and the entire offensive side of the ball, you already know that. And so now you can communicate in camp with that in mind. It's all right, as we're going back and installing this part of the offense, these are the areas that we got to troubleshoot through this last year on the field. For the quarterbacks, they obviously didn't get to do that. Those were conversations that Mike Denbrock had with Riley. But I think overall, that continuity is invaluable in knowing, all right, the foundation that we're laying in camp right now, here's directly how we've applied it and communicated through the issues that come off that. Like you can start to already have the 200 and 300 level problem solving in mind as you're laying the 100 level football foundation for your fall.
Okay, so let's talk about breakout players then. We have two offensive, well, we'll say one offensive player, one position group we want to talk about just kind of as a whole, maybe make some predictions there. But we also have two defensive players. So let's start with those, Mike. Big number change in the offseason. Bryce Young going from 30 to number 95. What does it mean?
It means All-American season loading, Jess. I wish I was joking. That was one of the guys where I saw him show up in 30 and I thought, all right, you're a freshman, you're coming in, you're just happy to have a number. Like college of the NFL, you're kind of taking what comes to you. You can have some say, and especially depending on how highly recruited you are, a lot of guys will put in for that before they get on campus of the number they want based on what's available. But I thought, all right, young guy going to come in, again, one of my card carrying Nepo baby brethren. So trying not to rock the boat, going and earn the stripes.
Mom and dad athletes at Notre Dame. So
yeah,
big time, double legacy, double domer, whatever they call it these days.
Yeah, but you know what? So seeing him out there, I understood it. But now seeing this, Jess, combined with another offseason in Notre Dame weight program, you and I have talked about him off air plenty, but Bryce reminded me last year of when you see a puppy with huge paws and you're like, oh, he's going to grow into those eventually and be massive. And you saw so much of that happen naturally for him last season as they increased the snap count as the year went along. Obviously had a couple of tough penalties in the playoff run on that punt team,
which were kind of awesome against Georgia, right? That was in the Sugar Bowl, right, Mike? The roughing penalties on special teams.
Which, yeah, and you love that. Like, it's the Mike Tomlinism. I'd always rather say woe than sick 'em, have to pull a guy back a little bit effort-wise, and that seems to be the thing with him, but Jesse's just so like his dad, who was a GA on Notre Dame's campus when Charlie Weis was there under me, and seeing BY out there in just the coach's polo every day, you knew that dude still had snaps loaded up. Like, you saw the Hall of Fame difference in just how he was built, and it seems like his son's got plenty of that in terms of the measurables, but got that invaluable experience. Again, one of the best things this coaching staff's done is get freshmen ready to play sooner and get them valuable reps and high leverage moments that they can draft on later. Like, that's a guy that seems to be an easy candidate for a huge blow up season here.
Yeah, he finished last season with 23 tackles, 3 blocked kicks as a freshman, like led the nation in that. But part of a position group that really was banged up a lot in 2024, and him along with the next guy we want to talk about, Boubacar Traore. Um, they could make a huge difference coming in on the defensive line and pressuring the quarterback. Traore played in 5 games last season before he was injured in the Louisville game, which was a really, really big loss. And he's a young player. I think last year he's technically a redshirt sophomore this year, I believe. But he finished the season in just those 5 games with 5 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hurries. He had a pick 6 against Purdue, and he just was an impact player, Mike. And he's someone that you would have loved to have seen develop over last season and make a difference in the playoff. But unfortunately, like we said, like Notre Dame just had a lot of injuries on that defensive line. So, what are your hopes for him this season coming back from that injury?
He reminded me, like, I got the same feeling watching him last year that I did watching Isaiah Foskey as like a freshman or a sophomore, whatever season it was where he started getting playing time, but hadn't yet fully started to make that push towards being Notre Dame's all-time sack leader type thing, where you just saw in those limited bursts dynamic athleticism, great movement skills, a real suddenness to his game. And so Boubacar for me is like, I said my head's pick is Bryce because you've got the lineage. He's much more physically
The
impressive.
number
But my
change.
gut, the number, which we can't underscore enough, having a cool number, instant stock up in both of our books. That's the official stance of the Echoes podcast.
Absolutely.
Cool numbers absolutely pay off and have an on-field correlation. But with Boubacar, he's the one that like my gut and my heart keeps going back to. I remember watching games and just going, "Oh, this dude moves different than the rest of the guys on the field at his position." And just in a year where Notre Dame, the strength of their defense could change, right? Last year we had Howard Cross and Riley Mills in the center of that defense that we were counting on to sort of be the heartbeat. This year it might have to be the edge unit where there's a
Mhm.
lot more experience and I think a lot more upside in terms of the talent. And these two guys we just mentioned are a huge part of that.
Yeah, and finished the season with 3 sacks too in those 5 games. So those are our 2 defensive breakout players, Mike. Eli Raridan is a tight end. He is a player that is getting a lot of offseason hype right now. I mean, we've seen pictures of him. He looks huge. He's going to be tight end 1 and with like probably a big gap afterwards in terms of abilities on this roster. Last season, was played a lot. He had a pretty bad ACL injury a couple years ago, so he was still coming back from that in the 23 season. But in 2024, he had 11 receptions for 90 yards. But he's really someone that was playing a lot and blocking a lot. So this year, what do you think his impact will be? And do you think he's going to be sort of like that Mitchell Evans to Sam Hartman connection that a young quarterback may really need and look to sort of bail him out?
Yeah, Jess, I have had real high hopes for Eli since I saw him again his freshman year before the injuries took hold. He was a guy that showed up to me as a blocker before as a pass catcher. Like you saw him do some things that were well beyond his experience level on the field. And as a former alignment, I'm always really drawn to that from tight ends and running backs. It's kind of my the thing I always notice first with those guys. It took him a while, I'm sure confidence wise, because I think he was a guy that had knee injury in high school
Mhm.
too. And so when you compound all that, the mental side of coming back from an injury is so difficult to clear. And Mike Denbrock last year, I thought, did a really good job sort of platooning the tight ends and skill players and packages. They used them all very specifically, whether it was run or pass packages. But Eli's got the most juice as a pass catcher. Like I think Cooper Flanagan, when he was on the field, was one of our better run blockers in
Mhm.
terms of going out there and being the hammer that way. But we know Notre Dame has had a tight end on their roster that's gone on to be like an NFL starter or whatever the streak is every year for what feels like my entire adult lifetime. And you're right. We saw him. We were back out on campus, you and I both, for my family's charity golf tournament, and seeing him out there next to, Kyle Rudolph, my former teammate, and a bunch of the other guys, physically fits the profile. Like, he looks like the next one. And so I think another year removed from that injury in an offense where you go back and look everywhere Mike Denbrock's been. I mean, LSU was a little more receiver heavy, but they
Mhm.
had Mason Taylor on that roster. You go back to Cincinnati, they had a couple of good tight ends in that room. Like, Mike Denbrock was the tight ends coach at Notre Dame when I was there, so he
Right.
knows how to use that position as well as anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I sort of alluded to earlier, like that's going to be really helpful when you have a quarterback who hasn't played a lot before to be able to rely on someone with that size and that sort of um stature to be able to check down to on some short passing plays if they need. But that also brings us to the wide receiver room, which is sort of our last breakout star, hopefully. Hopefully the whole room. But there's a number of players that we could sort of select out of this group. Obviously, Malachi Fields, the transfer from Virginia, is getting so much hype because he is just a big guy and he's been very productive. And now he's going to be on, a team that has a better O line, hopefully better quarterback. We have Will Pauling, who also transferred in, Cam Williams, who is a 5-star player that he's like a top 50 recruit that didn't play last year when he was a freshman, but is he going to figure it out this season? Is he going to become a weapon? We already know about Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison. They've been on the team a while, and Greathouse had, a sort of breakout playoff run last year. But like, who are some of these other players that could break out this season among the wide receivers? Is it Micah Gilbert? Is it Elijah Burris? Like, what do you expect to see out of this room? And is it as has it improved as much as it seems like it has on paper in like the last few cycles of wide receiver rooms where it's been like a little touch and go at times?
Yeah, I think it has in terms of like some of the quality depth. Like, certainly this room got a huge boost during the playoff run, seeing what Jaden Greathouse did on the top end and kind of how that went. Jordan Faison's been a really interesting piece for that room in his time as a two-sport star here. But I think like Notre Dame's always had the one really good receiver and in the room, right? Whether it was, Chase Claypool, Miles Boykin, all these guys going back to when, Michael Floyd and Golden Tate were on campus when I was there. That was probably, after the Samardzija era, like the zenith of what we've seen, Will Fuller, others, where we'd have like one really great receiver. I think we're getting closer to this now being a place that can have multiple guys that are really effective in the room. And you mentioned it, like Cam Williams is the one you look at, especially. And I think one of the interesting things is always going to be, because we always hear about teams where the guys running show team when they were young have a good connection. And we know for CJ Carr, for Kenny Minchie, those were the young guys in the quarterback room the last couple of seasons. And so in theory, they were guys that could have been getting reps with, young guys like Cam and might already have a bit of that rapport going into this fall. Because again, we can't overstate enough, Jess, last year, you didn't have time to build the relationship between quarterback and receiver until fall camp
Mhm.
because Riley Leonard was dealing with that injury. So who are you most excited to see in this room? Like, you follow the recruiting in a lot of these guys as well as anybody. Who are the players that you're excited to see step up in this room?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Cam Williams because obviously he's like, a top 50 recruit, but also comes from my hometown. So I sort of have like a personal, like, I'm rooting for him. Like, I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, and there's always been like a why aren't there more like Chicago to Notre Dame stars? Obviously, Mike, your era, Chris Watt was also a Glen Ellen native. He was a legend at ND on the O line. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm always rooting for the Chicago. Miles Boykin's another one. The Chicago recruits, just because like they're players that my high school team would have played against, and so it's cool to see that pipeline hopefully continue to grow and strengthen. But I mean, I'm excited about the transfers. I'm excited about it. Like last year, does Notre Dame beat Georgia without Jaden Harrison having that return touchdown? I mean, maybe they do. They did win by more than a touchdown, but it's like not even just players that you take out of the portal to contribute like week in and week out. It's like you never know what moment like which player will have. Like that's, I don't know, that's a stupid way of
Oh,
phrasing it, but you know what I
no, I
mean.
think it's spot. I think it's spot on, Jess. I mean, RJ Oben, who came over from Duke, that people expected a lot out of, and that maybe didn't have the regular season, but then had that massive strip
Yes.
sack during the
Right
bowl
before
run. That
halftime.
all of a
Yep.
sudden, and to your point, I think Notre Dame, in one, identifying players in the transfer portal, has done a good job of finding guys that became impact players, but also guys that still stuck it out, even if
Right.
it didn't look
Exactly.
the way they wanted it to. And I think keeping guys that mentally locked in throughout a season where maybe they expected one thing and another happened, to then still be ready for those moments, have preparation meet opportunity. That's a huge feather in the cap of the coaching staff and their ability to reach and teach these guys still, even if it's different than the picture they thought they were getting.
Other than that, though, Mike, obviously Elijah Burris, Jerome Bettis Jr. I'm excited to see how these I'm a Steelers fan too, so these former Steelers children end up on this team in this wide receiver room. But I think Burris, maybe this could be a big year for him to step up. I've heard great things about him, and I guess we'll see more when camp starts later this week.
Yes, get excited for camp footage season hitting a timeline near you. We've already had it in the NFL. I cannot wait for the college version of it where we start to get those isolated shots of receivers making great plays.
But no injuries, Mike. We already did our brutal offseason injury. Please, no more.
But Notre Dame fans, join us in prayer to protect our sweet lads as they embark on camp this week. We're going to embark on a break here quick. And when we come back, we will get to the comments from Lincoln Riley on the future of the Notre Dame-USC rivalry right here on The Echoes.
Welcome back to The Echoes. I'm Jessica Smetana. He's Mike Golic Jr. Subscribe, rate, review. Follow us along. Thanks for tuning in today. We are at The Echoes ND Pod on all your social media apps. And also we're on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Mike, we want to now talk about the controversy of the century. The Notre Dame-USC series shouldn't be controversial at all. Should just be a thing that we do every year and we don't have to talk about it. It's just a thing we expect as college football fans. And yet here we are in the year of our Lord 2025, almost exactly 100 years to the day of the first Notre Dame USC game, which was in 1926. So, Mike, last week, Big Ten Media Days, we get some more comments from Lincoln Riley about the state of the Notre Dame-USC series. Up to this point, if you have not been following along, Notre Dame has said, Pete Bavacqua, the athletic director, has said, we want to schedule this game every year. We have no issues continuing to play USC. Marcus Freeman has said, we want to play against USC every year that college football is played, like, period, end of sentence. Meanwhile, Lincoln Riley has said, we need to make sure it works because of the new expanded playoff. He's claimed, like last week at Big Ten Media Days, that he wants to play Notre Dame, but there's also a but at the end of it every time, which is, but we want to make sure we don't make our schedule too hard so we miss the playoff. Mike, first off, what are your thoughts on the most recent batch of comments from Lincoln Riley about the USC Notre Dame series?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because the question that Lincoln was asked in the press conference didn't have anything to do with continuing the rivalry. It mentioned the timing of it. He got asked about it because there are people that had broached the subject of maybe Notre Dame plays USC at the beginning of the season in one of these kickoff classics, because with a lot of these, losing early in college football has always been really valuable. These games become more forgivable once you get to the conference slate, and it makes sense chronologically. You always want to be the best team and the best version of yourself come November. Teams improve over the course of a season. So he got asked about the timing and then launched into, because a lot of this has turned into the indictment of Lincoln Riley, the competitor, and this conversation about him not wanting to play the game. And he made the point that, like when he took the Oklahoma job, his first thought was, I get to coach in OU Texas here. He appeals to when I got the USC job, I was like, I get to coach in ND-USC. And I've always told the story, like, that was how I felt about being a player and coming to Notre Dame. We played USC in 2012, the last game of the regular season before our national championship berth. It was a pseudo play-in game in the BCS area. If we would have lost that game, we would have not made the college football playoff to play Alabama. And I sat with my dad in the hotel the night before the game, and I said, I understand what's on the line, but I came here to beat this team. And we had basically gone back and forth between beating each other, usually on the road, in that rivalry during my college career. And so that meant a lot to me to go. And so I understood that appeal from Lincoln Riley, and just part of me almost believed him. Like, I do think he does get a lot of the slings and arrows that come with this for decisions that we know aren't made by the coaches. It's not like Lincoln gets to make the call ultimately on what happens in the series. The problem is, none of the reasons given by Lincoln Riley or the other coaches in the Big Ten, in my mind, really hold a lot of water, because Lincoln mentioned, hey, there's a lot of differences between the two schools. We're in a conference. Notre Dame's not, which has only been the case for checks notes the entirety of this rivalry, especially in modern football. both these teams have always been competing for national championships, and now there's never been easier access to the championship event in the
Correct.
sport
Yes.
than there is right now with all of this. So this notion that you would want to remove the stakes from this rivalry, which to your point has been a Big Ten talking point, clearly handed down by Tony Petitti to everyone else, that these guys are following to the letter of the law, it's antithetical to everything that we love about the big time rivalries in college sports. And so none of that passes the smell test, which to me does make it more believable that all of these coaches are going out here and towing the company line, trying to get the version of the playoff that they all want.
Right. Well, the version of the playoff they all want is this 4-4-2-2-1 plan where the Big Ten and the SEC would get 4 automatic qualifiers, the ACC and the Big 12 will get 2, and then there'd be a G6 and then at-large teams. And Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, said that he thinks if a team has an 8-4 record, that they should be eligible for the postseason. And a team with that record in any other sport translated to a winning percentage would be in the postseason. That is just not how college football has worked for the entire history of college football. So I think trying to convince fans that that's true is going to be its own struggle. But there was also reporting in Sports Illustrated by Pat Forty, Mike, that Petitti has already made assurances to the Big Ten broadcast partners that they would eventually get this playoff format, and it would include additional play-in games, and it would be a third place and sixth place Big Ten ranked, or third place and sixth place in the Big Ten playing against each other as a play-in game to the college football playoff. So this is
Well, yeah, because it would be what, 1 versus 2 would play for the Big Ten
right.
championship, both guaranteed a playoff spot. 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5 would then play for the other 2 playoff spots out of the conference, right?
Yes. And which is more television inventory, just to sort of
Yes.
state the obvious. So obviously more money for the conferences, and they don't make $100 million per school is not enough. They need more, Mike. Which is sort of like my big beef with all of this is that, like, I don't think there's a bottom. I think we'll just continue to change things because there will always be an opportunity to make more money, to the point where the product ultimately may be diluted. And that's sort of like the existential fear about all of this. But just in a sort of like, how does this affect Notre Dame fans now way? This season is, or I guess next 2026 is the last scheduled Notre Dame-USC game in LA. And oh wait, no, it's this. Sorry,
No,
it's this
they didn't.
one.
No, USC wanted to extend
That's right.
that and give themselves the last game in the series as the home game, and Notre Dame promptly said no to that. So as it's scheduled right now,
Thank you.
this fall in South Bend is the last version of the Notre Dame-USC rivalry that's scheduled at this point. They weren't going to give up the last version of that game while USC wouldn't commit long term.
Exactly. Notre Dame wants a long-term extension, and USC is sort of saying, well, maybe we can play at the beginning of the season. Maybe we can do this, or maybe, I don't know. Like, they're just trying to get what's beneficial to them out of it, because playing Notre Dame is hard, and they are putting this in the context of, well, the Big Ten plays 9 conference games and the SEC and the ACC only play 8, and we think they should play 9. And until they play 9, we're not going to schedule difficult non-conference opponents. This is where Indiana plays into it, because Indiana recently canceled a series with Virginia, of all of all Power 4 teams. They don't want to play Virginia. They replaced it with Kennesaw State, Mike, which just became an FBS team like a year ago. They were, I think, statistically the worst. Maybe Kent State was worse last year, but one of the worst teams last season in college football and FBS football. So I don't know. I'm not buying it, because I think that, first of all, the reason why people are claiming Lincoln Riley is scared is because if you win the game, it doesn't matter. If you win the game,
Right.
it boosts your strength of schedule, it boosts your criteria, and you shouldn't be afraid to lose, right? Like, that is why people are saying, okay, he's just scared of losing. Notre Dame's record over the last 12 seasons, I guess 14 seasons is, or 12 seasons is 9-3 against USC. Notre Dame has really won the series, and there's a number of reasons for that, right? Like, Brian Kelly got the program to a place where they were winning a lot of these games. Clay Helton and all of the various USC administrative and head coaching hires got to the place where USC has been struggling over the last decade. And they have tried to turn it around. They hired Lincoln Riley, paid him a boatload of money, obviously hired Chad Bowden from Notre Dame to try to revamp the recruiting, especially in the California area. And they have a bomb
Yeah.
recruiting class coming in for next season.
I
So
can say it has worked so
it
far.
has worked so far. I mean, they did lose to Maryland last year. Like they did lose a number of Big Ten games last year that USC, I think, just expects to win, right? Like, sure, you can take your Penn States or whatever, like teams that made the playoff, Notre Dame, but
Sure.
they lost to Maryland in a game where they had a huge lead going into halftime. So it hasn't worked out on the field yet, but clearly they're trying to turn things around. So if you have this like amazing recruiting class coming in, you believe in Lincoln Riley, like you believe that this should be a game that you can win. And that's where the USC is scared thing is coming into play. So yes, I think he is towing the company line, trying to sell the playoff format to people and trying to, I think the Big Ten as a whole is trying to make it sound like they're the ones that have it the hardest because it's not
Yes.
fair that the SEC only plays 8 games. It's not fair that they're expected to play a 9-game conference schedule and play Notre Dame and play Texas. Ohio State's playing Texas this year in the non-con. And I just think, as a whole, it is a huge bummer that is where the college football discourse has gotten us and the playoff discourse has gotten us. Because if you are going to expand the playoff and you do lose to Notre Dame and Notre Dame is, say, a top 25 team, um, you would kind of like logically that wouldn't be the end of the world now versus when it was a 14 playoff or even
Oh,
before the playoff where it's like, yeah, like you said, that would end your season.
it's the notion that even in the 14 playoff era, teams weren't rewarded for challenging themselves out of conference, even if that ended in a loss, is just not true. Like this picture that we've had painted by conferences trying to act like the SEC, that strength of schedule is ignored, or that the ninth conference game is this massive delta, when especially with the like massive version of both of these new conferences where the SEC and the Big Ten are so bloated with teams now, we can't act like just because a team is in the Big Ten, especially in the bottom half of these conferences, that team is markedly better than people from the Big 12 or the ACC when it comes to the bottom of the conference. So you're not going to get that this ninth game matter is the end of the world in terms of this. Does it speak to what college football has always had as a problem, which is the fact that the scheduling is uneven and hard to judge one against the other in a way that makes picking a championship field for the sport and understanding who's good year to year extremely difficult? Hell yes, there is nothing new about that. That is a college football problem as old as time. But we've got everyone doing is really doing a good job of feeding the propaganda machines to create the reality they want to make us all believe, oh yeah, the sport's gotta be this way. This is clearly the only way you're going to be able to have playoff success, where that's not true. We've seen all the time there's a ton of different ways to do this. I understand in the Big Ten, going back to when Michigan first beat Ohio State and got to the playoff, they did on the backs of one of the a week out of conference schedule. Their national championship season was more the same. It worked. And so when people see the ball go through the basket, we hear the copycat league. And I'm not saying this is all Michigan's fault or anything. I'm sure there's examples of plenty of people doing it before it, but it just seems to be where now it's being driven home that that's the only way to make it to the college football playoff version that you want. And we've seen over a decade now that that's just, I don't think, true.
Yeah, and just to sort of like reiterate, I think why a lot of USC fans and Notre Dame fans feel betrayed by this, because it's not just Notre Dame fans who are like,
No.
Lincoln Riley, you stink. Like, just play the damn game the way it's always been played. Like, no, Notre Dame materially has not changed anything. They are still independent. They still want to schedule you. The USC is the one that was like, well, we're going to join the Big Ten, and now our lives are going to get a lot harder because we have to travel across the country 6 times a year. No one made you do that, first of all. So that is the one material change of the last like 3 years, right? Like USC is in the Big Ten now for
Yeah.
some odd reason because they wanted more money. But this is like, to use this specific rivalry as leverage or as like a sort of bargaining chip, I think is sort of antithetical to why we're all here. Like you said, playing when you're a player at Notre Dame and you're playing USC, like that is a game that is circled on your calendar. And a lot of the sport has revolved around like who's in the playoff, who's going to be in this playoff spot, who's going to be on that playoff spot. But part of the reason that like I fell in love with college football and why I'm sure you did too, Mike, is because of the rivalries. It's because of the things that set college football apart from the NFL, which is, if you want football with parity, that's Sundays. Like we have that in the NFL. And like it's taken a lot of things to get that we will just never have in college football. So you could chase,
Right.
these scheduling agreements as long as you want. I just don't think it's possible. There's like 134 FBS teams, but that's besides the point. Like we have a football league with parity already, and it's not college football.
And well, I mean, college football now in a lot of ways has more parity than it has in a while
Yes, true.
because of NIL and the portal and the way that's evened things out. And quite honestly, the retirement of Nick Saban in a way that kind of shifted the tectonic plates of the sport.
Thank God.
But like Jess, to your point, and this is, you're right, a more existential conversation, but I've always said, if you fracture enough of the base of what made college football great, which is regionality, these rivalries, long-standing ties between fan bases and the people that they either love or hate, do you risk alienating the people that have always been the core? Notre Dame-USC is a really interesting through line through all of this. Like, yes, to your point, growing up and watching the Bush Push game, which famously had two teams that had national championship implications in their season that were on the line in that game, made the game feel as big as it was. Us playing Notre Dame, USC in 2012, even though they were now unranked, still had those implications. Like, removing that all of a sudden removes the teeth from something that's so special. And by the way, isn't a regional rivalry like Notre Dame USC is a helmet game that excites modern television executives the way like Notre Dame and Clemson announcing their new series in a rivalry that's become more of a thing since Notre Dame's entrance into the ACC as a partial member. Notre Dame USC is the kind of helmet game that TV execs would draw up and say, well, yeah, we want to make that happen because these are big brands that draw people in. And like you said, it's got a century of experience
Yeah.
behind it. Like, this is something you should all want to protect at the foundation of what still should be the thing that people making the decision acknowledge help makes this sport great.
I would even add like a more recent USC Notre Dame example of like, this is what we play the games for. 2023, Notre Dame was coming off of two like really tough losses to Ohio
Yep.
State and Louisville, and then hosted USC and Caleb Williams at home. Obviously, we all remember what happened. He threw 3 picks to Xavier Watts. I believe it was just an absolutely dominant defensive performance from Notre Dame. And that season, like, no, that was huge for Notre Dame because yeah, they didn't make the playoff. They were not they didn't live up to the potential that I think a lot of us had hoped going into the season, but you beat USC. Like, that's something that you remember, and like it was a sort of home atmosphere and environment that fans will just remember forever, even though they didn't
Yep.
win the national championship this year. These are like, it's sort of frustrating that a lot of the, sport has become like, let's say Notre Dame loses to Miami and Texas A&M. It's like, okay, well, they probably realistically don't have a great shot at making the 12-team playoff. Should they just not play the games then? Like, what are the things that as a fan you get excited for? It's rivalries, it's the home games, it's tailgating, it's player development, it's the band. It's like all of these things that set college football apart from professional football, like the NFL. And so, yes, like I said, using this as like a sort of bargaining chip, when this game goes back to 1926, when Newt Rockne was looking for a rival on the West Coast to play against. He was the ultimate college football salesman, and he wanted to sell Notre Dame across the country. And there was all sorts of reasons why the Western Conference, which is now the Big Ten, they didn't want Notre Dame, Catholic school. Like, we don't want to play against you. We don't want to schedule you. So Notre Dame's like, okay, we'll play USC then. And it became a rivalry that has been played 95 times, Mike. This will be the 96th meeting between the two schools. They've only paused it for COVID and World War II. So this is a
Like,
huge deal. I mean, people
yeah.
people compare this to, well, Notre Dame canceled their series with Michigan
Yes.
in 2013 when they joined the ACC for the 5-game scheduling agreement. I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. Okay, it is not the same thing. Notre Dame and Michigan have a very hated rivalry that goes back to Newt Rockne and Fielding Yost in like the 1909, the first time they paused that series. But there were decades where Notre Dame and Michigan didn't play each other because Michigan didn't want to play Notre Dame and Newt Rockne and Fielding Yost hated each other. So this is not the same thing. All of those years, Notre Dame played USC. And I think Navy is the only team that Notre Dame's played more games against. They've played 2 more games against Navy than they have against USC. And
Yeah.
behind that is Purdue, Pitt, Michigan State, a number of other teams that Notre Dame doesn't schedule every single year, including Michigan. So it's not the same thing. And I don't like when people try to make that equivalence, because this is like if Michigan canceled playing Ohio State every year.
Yes.
That is the better comparison.
And I think a lot of people poke fun because Notre Dame has so many like quote unquote rivalries and trophies and all that
Yes.
stuff that like this is the one. To your point, Michigan is Notre Dame's rivalry of proximity. We dislike. I as a player hated Michigan because we were so close to them. We're right on the border of Niles, Michigan. You see fans of there all the time. It was a lot more frequent. USC was the one where it was like this begrudging respect for something and a brand that for me in the early 2000s, an era where this would have never been a conversation that was even broached, this idea that Pete Carroll's USC would not be playing someone for fear of how it might affect their playoff chances. The thing that's ticked me off most in this is I've heard people say, well, USC doesn't need this game. No one in this needs this game in terms of the bottom line of playoff access. Everyone should want this game for all the reasons that you mentioned, like images of Sam Hartman in his only year at Notre Dame in the tunnel tossing down the
Yes.
Trojan sign after he helps win that game, upending the Heisman Trophy, Caleb Williams in the process. Like all of that stuff matters, making those little
Yeah.
memories. So I don't know where it goes from here, Jess. I hope everyone involved has enough shame to understand that this should continue and mean something to a lot of people, but we'll kind of have to wait and see on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need a nitro cold brew every morning, Mike, but it is something that I look forward to when I wake up because I do it every day and it makes me feel good. Sometimes it might ruin my day because I'll have a caffeine crash at 10 a.m. Some days I feel amazing afterwards. I don't need it, but this is what life is for. Life is for getting absolutely jacked up on nitro and then watching college football and hating a team for no reason other than you're very familiar with them and you just want to beat them and you want to laugh at their mascot trying to use his little stabby sword in the middle of the field and it falling over. That is what it's about. That is why we play the games.
Notre Dame USC, the nitro cold brew of college football. We're going to go ease off of our caffeine high here for a second. And when we come back, give a little update in the recruiting world for Notre Dame fans that should have them very excited about the future of this program. Next on the Echoes. All right, welcome back to the Echoes at the Echoes ND Pod on all social media. Thank you to everyone who's made it this far. Leave us a review. We read them on air. We mentioned that off top. We are very vain, and I check the charts way more often than I should. So help us beat the algorithm. It means a lot to us. Jess, just as this news means a lot to us here, we talked about Notre Dame's 2026 recruiting class a little bit already on the podcast, the top 5 recruiting class on most services at this point. 2027 already making some news. A big commitment. Notre Dame gets their 3rd commit of the 2027 class by way of North Cobb in Kennesaw, Georgia. 4-star quarterback Teddy Jarrard commits to Notre Dame in this class. He joins a linebacker and a long snapper,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is incredible that we've got a long snapper commit already in that class. But
I love it.
Jess, it's incredible, as is this news about Notre Dame. And Jess, from your vantage point, Notre Dame coming off of a win against Georgia in the college football playoff, the big run we've had. We've talked about how winning begets more winning, but how huge is this for Notre Dame to now be able to go down into Georgia and pull out a recruit of this caliber at quarterback?
Yeah, it's huge. And I think the thing, people, your eyes may glaze over when you hear 2027 class because realistically, he probably won't be on the field for a number of years. And you never know if he, God forbid, decommits or transfers, whatever. So, like, yes, like this is looking into the future a little bit farther than a lot of fans want to. However, it is important, Mike, because this is a player who Notre Dame obviously wanted, made the offer, got, and now they can go to all their other players, especially on offense in that class, and say, this is who will be throwing you the football. This guy's going to be in your class. We're really excited about him. He's a highly rated prospect, like you said, entering his junior year. So I know he's a 4-star right now. I think he's like a top 200 guy, but that will probably change as he plays more. So we'll keep an eye on all of that sort of thing and let you know if there's any updates there in terms of like re-rating or anything like that. But it's important.
To that point, I saw Pete Sampson mention that last month he was at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge in Indy. He was named the quarterback MVP, working with prospects a year older. So, like, in a day and age, and I know Bud Elliott does a great job talking about all the changes in modern recruiting and the ways we have to measure prospects that make them easier to scout than ever before. Like those are all good signs that he's trending towards being a guy
Yes.
that probably rates higher.
Right, and then there's, like, the camps, and then some sites rate the camps higher, some sites
Yeah.
rate the, playing on your team in high school higher, and you have to look at the level of talent that you're playing against in high school too, so, obviously, all of this is subject to change, but I think it's a big deal, and, you were once a young high school player who was being
Yeah.
recruited to play at Notre Dame. You probably would have been disinherited by your parents if you didn't choose Notre Dame, but was there ever someone that Charlie Weis, dangled in front of you and was like, "Hey, this is who you could be snapping the ball to if you come to Notre Dame."
Yeah, I almost forget sometimes, but I think it was, whichever recruiting publications were at that point. But my recruiting class coming out of high school was the number one recruiting class in the country in 2008. Like we had, Kyle Rudolph, Michael Floyd, and to your point, Dane Christ was the 5-star quarterback out of Southern California, who I always tell people, obviously Dane's career at Notre Dame was upended by injuries in a way that ultimately kept him from, having the kind of career that I'm sure he wanted and Notre Dame fans wanted to see there with back-to-back knee injuries on Halloween weekend. But I always tell people when they describe it factor in a player, that was the guy. Like on all our recruiting trips, texting guys throughout the year and the rest of it. Like I know modern recruiting's changed a lot, but trying to build that camaraderie among classes. We see players interact on social media a bunch. You saw after the reaction to Teddy Jarrard, a bunch of prospects and recruits that Notre Dame's going after who either know him from playing with him or against him in the state of Georgia all had different reactions about that. And those relationships are something that if you've got, and usually the quarterbacks we know we associate it with that position, but like that's how Dane was, where he was the guy checking in on everyone. He was the guy that was, texting other recruits that they were trying to go after as the sell, because we know quarterback is the position that, right, wrong, or indifferent, gets a lot of the lion's share of attention and credit for what goes right and wrong. And so if you feel like you've got a guy that absolutely not only becomes a selling point in and of himself, but then if he's really into it, to your point, it is early. We'll hopefully see this as a recruit that sticks with Notre Dame the entire time. And if you've got a guy that's really bought in like that, that becomes a weapon in the word of mouth game and recruiting that is a massive asset to any part of the operation that you're trying to do there.
Yeah, and Dane is an absolute legend, and we have to get him on the show sometime. I've gotten to know him very well because of, your annual golf tournament, and
Yeah,
that guy's got some stories, Mike. He's got
he
some stories.
he Dane, like in this day and age, Dane would have been a multimillionaire coming out of high
Oh,
school. He was
100%.
he was
Yeah.
we played in the Army All-American game coming out of high school. I don't even know if they're the sponsor of that game anymore. And the quarterbacks on Dane's side were Dane, Blaine Gabbert, and Andrew Luck. Like, and just the fact that, like, again, Andrew Luck goes on to be one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all
Now
time
the
and all that.
GM at
Like,
Stanford.
yeah, it's just it's a crazy world to think about. But he was one who would have some great insight into recruiting stories back then. Was someone recruited heavily by LSU, USC, all these big places. So we'll definitely have to do that at some point. But it's a big win for Notre Dame. And again, it's a 3-person class right now. But that kind of again, proof of concept when you see the direct ripple effects and results of that playoff run last year. Remind you how interconnected this all is.
Absolutely. So before we go, we want to just sort of like round out the echoes with some non-football news in this, summer where there's no one in school right now, Mike, but we do have a number of professional athletes, former Notre Dame athletes that we wanted to talk about. So take us to the world of lacrosse and tell us what's going on right now.
Yes, proud of you, Irish. Big shout out to our boy Chris Kavanaugh, fresh off of the last member of the Kavanaugh dynasty coming through Notre Dame lacrosse. His older brother Matt there when I was there. Pat and Chris, part of the team that won back-to-back national championships for the Irish there. And going back to last week, July 25th, Chris Kavanaugh broke the record for goals scored by a Redwoods rookie in the Premier Lacrosse League, the professional lacrosse league of note now for the sport, where he passed his current teammate and Notre Dame assistant coach Ryder Garnsey, who had 14 in his rookie season. I know Chris's first goal in the PLL came off an assist from Ryder, so pretty cool to see them fresh off, the sidelines where it was a coach-player relationship. now teammates there as really both Kavanaugh brothers. Matt recently retired, but Pat and Chris both near the top of the league in goals scored, Pat in points, since he's always been great at the assist game going back to his time in college. Just great to see two of Notre Dame's greatest lacrosse players in history immediately going and paying dividends for their PLL team there.
And also going viral because Chris Kavanaugh had a quote that I saw on a quote graphic. I can't remember where, but it was about how he was on campus on his way to take a midterm and saw Coach Marcus Freeman running at 6 a.m. and working out in the weight room by himself, which is, don't do as I say, do as I do if you're a head coach. And Marcus Freeman's like, I got to get my quick pump in because my schedule's booked the rest of the day dealing with these football players. Love that.
That's how you end up doing those GQ interviews where they document your workout routine, and it makes the V-necks fit very well, which we know Coach Freeman loves to rock there. So yes, a big shout out to Chris for both showing love to Marcus. The Notre Dame football and lacrosse relationship well documented at this point. Jess, we've as always got big news for the Irish and the W here. What do you got from some of the big performers?
Oh yeah, so Jewel Lloyd, my class at Notre Dame, I think class 2016-ish, your sister's grade. Jewel, she's been struggling this season. She was like a big off-season pickup for the Las Vegas Aces, who are coming off of not last year but the year before a repeat in the WNBA finals. But she had her probably best game of the season, 20 points in a win over Arike Ogunbowale's team, the Dallas Wings. Obviously, we all remember Arike from the game-winning shots in the Final Four in 2018 when Notre Dame won the women's basketball national championship. Jackie Young had a great game Sunday also. She had 24 points and 8 assists, shot 5 from 7 from 3. Sonia Citron, the rookie, having another great game for the Mystics. She's so solid. She's incredible to watch, keeping them in playoff contention, but they did lose in a game against the Phoenix Mercury, which have Maddie Westfeld's older sister, Kat, who also played at Notre Dame as a older rookie on the Mercury this year. And then Maddie Westfeld, she played really well for the Sky on Sunday. They lost to the Indiana Fever, Bree Turner's team, but she played 23 minutes. It's a lot for her. I mean, she's getting more and more playing time as a second round pick for the Sky, another rookie. So a lot of good. I mean, you can basically turn on any game in the WNBA. I know this is coming out Tuesday. I think the Lynx play Tuesday night. There will be a Notre Dame player on your screen and you will be able to watch them score buckets because they're all very, very good. So it's football off season, but there's plenty of Irish love to go around.
Yep, you can always show love. We love our Irish in the pros on all sides here on this podcast. You continue to show love to them at the Echoes ND Pod. The comment section on YouTube was awesome last time. Leave us your breakout star predictions for this year's upcoming season. As again, by the time you hear this podcast, training camp will be getting started at the end of the week. And by next week, when this podcast drops again, I'm sure we'll already have some early stuff to react to. So as always, Jess, thanks and go Irish.
Go Irish.